Um, Hello, everyone. I would like to talk about why I think that a Jewish state is not a solution for the Jewish people or anyone, and why really a Jewish state is a problem, is the problem, and not the solution. We are now in May of 2021, and we see tremendous hostility in terms of violence between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The Israelis inside Israel, in the West Bank, Jerusalem, and in Gaza. We see a lot of bombing going on, tremendous amount of bombing. I feel horrible for the bombing for both sides, but the bombing is really a demonstrate that Israel failed to provide what it said it wants to provide for the Jews, and that's safety and security. We have to think back to what was the reason for the creation of the state of Israel to begin with. Israel was created as a Jewish state in order to provide safety and security for the Jews in terms of because of the anti-Semitism that developed mostly in Russia and Europe, um, and then the pogroms against Russian and European Jews mostly, and the Holocaust in which 6 million Jews were killed. Israel developed to protect the Jews. In other words, Zionism became the theory that Herzl started in the late 18th century to provide a state for the Jews because he felt that Jews will not be protected unless they have their own state. And that was the idea that was inculcated and developed within the Jewish community, and it is accepted up to now. I personally feel that the remedy that Herzl chose for anti-Semitism was the wrong remedy. Basically, he said we need to, we meaning the Jews, we need to move out of where we live. We need to um, accept, so to speak. He didn't say that, but he really accepted anti-Semitism as a reality, as a given reality, and the Jews need to move out and make room and make life better for the anti-Semites, so that they do not have to deal with the Jews. And so the idea of running away from one country to another is not a remedy. It's not the proper remedy. The proper remedy would have been to insist on equality, to insist that Jews should be as equal as everyone else. And that philosophy of equality should have been a Jewish philosophy or universal philosophy up until today. But unfortunately, the concept of equality is not being discussed here. So Israel was developed as a Jewish state in order to provide safety for the Jews after the Holocaust. And the question is, did Israel provide safety for the Jews? In other words, did Israel fulfill its vision to provide safety for the Jews? So if we think about what happened to the Jews in Israel and Palestine since Israel was created, I think it is fair to do an analysis and to see that Israel fulfilled its goal. And I think you will all agree that the goal was to give safety and for the Jews, to the Jews. So, judging by that criteria, since 1947, we are in 2021, more than 23,000 Jews have been killed in Israel and Palestine. More, much more. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's more than 23,000. More than 100,000 Jews were injured. And I'm talking about as a result of the conflict itself. More than 100,000 Jews were injured. And it's not the end of it. It's not like, okay, from now on, everything is fine. It looks like from now on, everything is not fine because we are talking about more possibilities of war now with other countries, with the Palestinians, with Gaza, and possibly the West Bank, and inside Israel. Inside Israel, Israel developed nuclear weapons, which means that Israel is concerned about a nuclear possibility, a nuclear war. It has a nuclear, Israel claims by its own admission that there is another country, mostly Iran, that wants to eliminate it, annihilate it by nuclear means. So, did Israel provide security to the Jews? If you compare the destiny, or if you compare what happened to the Jews everywhere else, including Arab countries, including Iran, including more Jews were killed in Israel and Palestine than any other place. That's a fact. I don't think that you can argue with that. The fact that Israel has a strong military, there's no question it has a strong military, but it doesn't give security, it doesn't give prosperity, safety to the Jews. So, in that sense, creating a Jewish state did not fulfill its intended original purpose. Just to the contrary. Now, you may say, well, yeah, but Israel is a huge economic success. I don't disagree with that. Israel is a huge economic success. But Israel was not created to be an economic success for the Jews. If your criteria is economic success as a success, then Israel is a success. But to have economic success without peace, to me, and I believe to most of you, is meaningless. What's the point of having economic success when you could be killed the next day because of a war? It just doesn't make sense. And you may say, yeah, but Israel has a strong military. Well, I agree. Israel does have a strong military. There's no question about it. It probably is the most capable militarily in the Middle East. It has a huge air force, used ground force, nuclear weapons. Probably, it's been reported in the hundreds of nuclear weapons. But does the military give it peace? No, it hasn't given peace. In fact, I argue that the military, the strong military, prevents peace because its leaders, time and again, its political leaders, use the military to deal with problems. It's kind of like, the expression, hammer sees everything as a nail. The same thing for the military in Israel. The military in Israel precludes other options for peace because it's been inculcated in the Israeli uh, population, in the Israeli public, that everything needs to be done through the military, that the military needs to solve everything. So right now we see the violence with Gaza. The politician, the first thing they did was use the military. They don't they don't really have any other tool to make, and they don't have a vision to make peace. So I think that the creation of a, and look, it's hard for me to say that. I am Jewish. I was born in Israel. I have Israeli roots, and I used to believe that a Jewish state is good for the Jews. But objectively speaking, when you look at the facts, you realize that it's not good for the Jews. It's horrible. Not to mention now that when you see what happens inside Israel, it turns out that even what the Israelis claim that the Palestinians inside Israel, what they call Arab Israelis, are accepting the notion of a Jewish democracy, turn out not to be true. And why would you blame them for not accepting that notion? What what minority, a religious minority, would be willing to accept to live in another religion's government, a government based on another religion? See, the problem is that Israel created its government, its state, that it is founded, it is uh, related, it is basically based on religion, a Jewish religion. So why would Muslim or Christian be happy with it to live in a Jewish state? Even if, Israelis tend to say, well, they have more freedom here than any. That's nonsense. No one wants to live in a country where they are basically second class citizens. And Arab Israelis cannot be first class citizens in a Jewish state. The whole culture of Israel is based on Jewish principles, on Jewish culture, on Hebrew songs, the radio, the television, the military. You can't you can't expect Muslims to accept that and as part of their identity. It's not going to happen ever. So now we see that Israel failed to make peace with its own people, with the people that it claims that are accepting the Jewish democracy concept. Now, let's think about that concept of a Jewish democracy. A democracy, by its nature, is secular. The whole purpose of creating a democracy is to avoid other issues, to have a government that is for the people, by the people, and regardless of who the people are, regardless of the people are of a certain religion, whether the people are tall or short, all of that has nothing to do with government. The government has to treat everyone equally, has to give peace and prosperity to everyone. And that's where I feel that Zionism and Jewish state failed, because the whole concept of Zionism and Jewish state is to give superior status to the Jews. And it's never going to work. It's never going to work because no one is willing to be inferior. So the Jews, when they came and created the state of Israel, should have created an equal state, a state for equal to everyone. They should not have agreed to remove the Palestinian and make them refugees, and they should have accepted the refugees. They should not have an occupation right now. In other words, the only way that everyone could feel safe and secure is equality. And the state of Israel, as a Jewish state, inherently, by its own definition, is not equal. It's not. Therefore, the Jewish state failed. And it failed in terms of universal criteria to be a democracy, and it failed its own people because its own people are, if you look at the security of the Jews since 1947, if you look at the whole totality of the area, things are a lot worse now than they were in 1947. They are a lot worse than they were 5 years ago. The whole area is a huge military warehouse with weapons, with missiles on both sides, with tanks, with soldiers, with a separation wall or fence, with thousands and thousands of missiles being thrown into each other. In 1947, you didn't have missiles over Gaza. You didn't have missiles over Tel Aviv. You didn't have thousands of missiles in the air of that area, not to mention the number of casualties, which is probably over 100,000 casualties since 1948. So I'm talking about dead people, people who died. 23,000 of them are Jews. So the Jewish state was not created, or I mean, the Jewish state did not provide safety and security to the area, and it did not provide safety and security to the people that it meant to protect, which is the Jews. So, is Israel able to change? I don't think so. In fact, Israel left alone and the Palestinians left alone. They believe that what they've done up to now is the correct thing, but it needs to be done more aggressively. In other words, the Israelis and the Palestinians feel that their failure was not in what they've done up to now, is that they haven't done it aggressively enough, that they need to increase the flames. They need to increase the violence in order to teach the other side a lesson. It's not going to happen. You don't make peace by violence. You don't, hate is not going to be the the response. You're not going to have the Palestinians love the Israelis when you kill Palestinians, and you're not going to have the Israelis love the Palestinians when you kill Israelis. It's just not going to happen. The animosity and the divide is going to be even bigger. So both sides really. I mean, the Palestinians are basically now became a mirror image of Israel. Whatever Israel um, thought, whatever Israel did in 1947, now the Palestinians have the exact same philosophy, that you need to teach the Jews a lesson, that the Jews do not understand any other language other than uh, um, violence. And that's what the Jews think of the Palestinians. So, what I am trying to say is that neither, really, look, Israel is really the most capable, or the most, it's the big elephant in the room. And Israel is leading this conflict, and Israel is leading the failure. They don't have a vision. They don't have a vision for peace. They never publish a peace plan. They don't have a peace plan. There is no such thing as peace with Palestinians, because the whole existence of the state of Israel is not to have peace with the Palestinians, it's to have a Jewish state. The Jewish state means that it is a state for the Jews. So, so the only way for Israelis to have peace with the Palestinians is if the Palestinians will accept Israel dominance. And the Palestinians are not going to accept that, and can't blame them. So now it turned out that not only the Israelis in the West Bank and Gaza are not accepting that, but the Palestinians inside. I'm sorry, did I say? Let me repeat. The Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza and inside Israel are not going to accept the superiority of the Jews. And you can't blame them. So the only formula is to create a formula that a government that would be equal to everyone, that would treat everyone equally and would not be based on religion, that it would be secular, just like democracy was meant to be when it was created. I mean, the people who created democracy were wise people. They understood these problems. It's not that the Israelis and the Palestinians uh, developed hate for each other and no one hated each other before. No. With all due respect to the Israelis and the Palestinians, more people, other people in the past hated each other. So the principle of democracy was developed for that purpose, to deal with the hate, to deal with, to make sure that the government focuses on the people and gives prosperity to the people and gives peace to the people based on secular principles without regard to their nationality or their religion. So Israel is not able to change because Israel is a Zionist country. It's a country that believes in the rights of the Jews to be superior in the state of Israel or Palestine. So this brings me to what I'm proposing. I'm not here just to lecture you. I'm also here to tell you that there is in my opinion, a good formula for peace under the circumstances. Uh, the best possible theory for peace between Israelis and Palestinians, no question about it. In theory, the best idea is to create one state, one secular democracy with one government um, that would treat everyone as equal, that would not be based on religious principle, but would be based on democratic secular principle. That, in theory, would have been the best theory, and possibly, I think, it was possible in 1947 or 1948. In other words, if I was living at that time and I had the state of mind that I had now, I would have said, let's not create a Jewish state, let's create a secular, democratic state that would treat everyone with respect, that the Palestinians would accept, that the Israelis would accept, and that we don't need to um, uh, remove Palestinians. We don't need to have a war. We just need to have a secular constitution that would treat everyone with respect. But we are not in 1947. We're not in 1948. In my opinion, the mistakes have been made. But the idea of now creating a secular uh, one government is impractical. It's an impossibility. Why? Because we have a strong Israeli government. We have a strong Hamas government. Someone said to me, wrote to me, and said, "What do you mean we have a strong Hamas government?" Yes, we have a strong Hamas government. Hamas is strong militarily. Hamas is managing 2 million people in Gaza under very difficult circumstances, and it is able to develop strong military. It is able to fight Israel for days. Last war before this one, it was, I think, over 50 days. It is strong ideologically. It has strong support from the people in Gaza and the West Bank and in Israel itself. So it is strong, and not only in Israel, but in the Arab world. Hamas has a lot of influence in the entire Arab population. So we have a strong Israeli government, we have a strong Hamas government, and we also have a strong PA government. PA is the Palestinian authorities in the West Bank. It is not strong militarily, but it is strong in terms of its ability, its political power. It has economic ability. It is managing 3 million Palestinians. So, in order to have one government in a secular democracy, you will need to dismantle these three governments. Because otherwise, how you create one government? And you need to create one government that would completely disregard the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and the Hamas government. Well, how are you going to do that? I mean, I get a lot of people who tell me, "Well, we need one state," and my reaction to them is, "Fine, yes, let's have one state, if possible, to dismantle the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, the Hamas government." It's not. It's not. They're not going to dismantle themselves. They have strong political support within their own people because their own political, their own population trusts that government. They think that that government is their protectors, even though, in my opinion, they are not their protector. But no one listens to me. So they are not. They are the population. The Israeli population thinks that the Israeli government is its own protectors. The people in Gaza feel that the Hamas government is protecting them. The people in the West Bank feel that the PA and Hamas government is protecting them. So they're not going to dismantle themselves. And And how are they going to dismantle themselves? How are they going to? Are they going to dismantle themselves and wait for another government to come up? They're not. And they also, these governments don't trust each other. They are suspicious of it. They are enemies of each other. So it's not going to happen. It's unrealistic to dismantle those governments. Therefore, in my opinion, it is unrealistic to have a one state, even though in theory it would have been the best solution. So the next good solution, in my opinion, is to create a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine together. There are 14 million people in that area, in Gaza, the West Bank, Jerusalem, and Israel, 14 million people. And to create a common secular government, and I'll have another presentation, or I had many of those presentations about how that government can function. In fact, tomorrow we have a simulation on that. You can join the simulation at our website, ipconfederation.org. But just at this time, assume that it is possible to create a common government for the people of Israel and Palestine together, that it is possible to have a secular government. It has to be secular, it cannot be religious, because a democracy, secular democracy, allows religion to exist. It honors religion, but it does not allow it to dominate the government. And the religion should not be dominating the government. So it has to be a secular government, and it has to be equal, equal to the Palestinians and the Israelis in terms of power, in terms of influence, in terms of representation, in terms of everything. And it has to be separate and independent of the Israeli government, the Palestinian government, and the Hamas government. It has to be a government for the people of Israel and Palestine together that would have its own vision, its own narrative, and will work exclusively for the purpose of making peace and give peace and prosperity to the people of Israel and Palestine. And it is possible. You can have a parliament members for the entire area of Israel and Palestine. You have a president and vice president, one Israeli and one Palestinian, and it will work. It will work independently of the Israeli and the Palestinian government, but it would it would give them safeguards. In other words, it would give the Israeli and the Palestinian government safeguards. In other words, the common government would eventually, when it passes legislation, and you can see that when we pass legislation in the simulation, it would go to the Israeli government and Palestinian government and say, hey, we passed legislation that is good for everyone, and we are giving you a veto power over that legislation. So that common government will give safeguards to the Israeli and the Palestinian governments and their people. And it is possible to pass legislation that neither side will be able to veto. And that's what we are doing in the simulation. We are demonstrating there are many, many areas that, in fact, all areas, the common government can pass legislation that would be a good um, compromise, a compromise that neither side could ignore. And that's what we are really showing in the demonstration, in the not demonstration, in the simulation, that it is possible to pass legislation that neither side, the Israeli or the Palestinian side, could veto or could object to. So I'm hoping that you join the simulation. By the way, we do a essay competition in the simulation. People who join, they can submit an essay, and they could win $500. $500 if their essay win. So the website is www.ip Confederation, and I hope you uh, join this channel and also share this video for other people to watch. So my name is Joseph Avasar, and I want to thank you. If you kept up with me up to now, that's a huge success. Thank you so much, and um, I hope to post another video explaining how this common government will work. Thank you so much. Bye bye.